Look, everyone keeps asking me what happened with Leo. And honestly, I'm sick of explaining myself to people who weren't even there. I'm Maya. I'm 28 now. And this whole situation is way more complicated than anyone wants to understand. They see the shell of me now, the girl who has everything on paper, yet nothing truly in her heart. They call me a cautionary tale. And perhaps they're right. Perhaps I am. This isn't a story about a villain or a hero, but about a choice. My choice. A choice that, in my youthful arrogance, I believed was a step towards a life more vibrant, more real. Instead, it led me down a path of regret so profound, it's etched into the very fabric of my being. This is the story of how I threw away the purest love I'd ever known, chasing after a mirage, and how I've been living with the phantom limb of that loss ever since. I met Leo through our mutual friend Chloe at this house party 4 months ago. I was 23 then, brimming with that restless energy only early 20s can truly understand, a hunger for experiences, for intensity, for a life that felt like a movie montage rather than a carefully plotted schedule. Chloe had always been the practical one, the grounded anchor in our trio, so it was no surprise she was friends with someone like Leo. He seemed sweet enough, really. Not the kind of guy who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room, but the one who'd subtly draw you in with his kind eyes and gentle smile. He was incredibly into physical touch, which I appreciated since that's always been my primary love language. A hand on my lower back, a gentle squeeze of my arm, an arm around my shoulder. These small gestures always made me feel seen, cherished. Leo mastered them effortlessly. The guy was a walking, talking manual of how to be the perfect boyfriend. He was always doing nice things, concerts, music festivals, movies. He even planned this 5-day beach vacation that was actually pretty fun. Don't get me wrong, it was all nice and everything. Beyond nice, it was good. But deep down, a little voice started to whisper, "Isn't this what boyfriends are supposed to do? If you're dating someone, shouldn't they want to make you happy and show you a good time?" Leo was one of those guys whose mom clearly raised him to be super polite and respectful. Always opening doors, insisting on paying for everything, remembering random details about things I mentioned in passing. He'd text me good morning every single day without fail, constantly checking in about how I was feeling, dropping whatever he was doing if I needed something, no matter how small. He was endlessly supportive, always there to listen to my work complaints or celebrate my small victories. It sounds sweet when I put it like that, doesn't it? Almost idyllic, and for a while it was. But honestly, it started feeling like a lot of pressure. The sheer consistency of his goodness became a weight. Between us, I was getting kind of bored. And I hated myself for it, even as the thought took root and began to bloom. Leo was so predictable. I could map out our entire weekend by Tuesday. Friday night movies at his place, Saturday brunch at the same cozy cafe we always went to, Sunday afternoon walks in the park. He had this whole routine down, a comfortable rhythm that should have been soothing, but to my restless spirit it felt like a cage. He never wanted to shake things up. When I'd suggest something spontaneous, he'd worry about money or timing or whether it was practical. Everything had to be planned and safe and responsible. A part of me admired his stability, but the larger part, the hungrier, wilder part, chafed against it. My friends, bless their well-meaning hearts, would constantly tell me how lucky I was. "Maya, he's such a catch." They'd gush, going on and on about how well Leo treated me. "You've got a good one, don't let him go." But they didn't see what it was really like day to day. They saw the grand gestures, the thoughtful gifts, the reliable presence. They didn't see the mundane predictability that slowly, insidiously, was draining the color from my world. Sure, he was stable and reliable. But where was the excitement? Where was that butterflies in your stomach feeling that Hollywood movies promised? I was 23. I should be having adventures and feeling that rush of new experiences, not settling into some domestic routine like we're already planning our retirement. The very idea made my skin crawl. It felt like an early death of youth. I started noticing other guys more when we'd go out. Guys who seemed confident and mysterious, who didn't feel the need to tell me every detail about their day at work. Leo, bless his heart, would give me a play-by-play of his lunch break while I was thinking about how there's got to be more to life than this level of predictability. His friend group was just as boring as he was. Nice guys who'd sit around playing video games and talking about work projects. When we'd hang out with them, I felt like I was aging 10 years in one night. I wanted to go to parties, meet interesting, unpredictable people, but Leo was always worried about getting home at a reasonable hour or not spending too much money on a night out. Here's the thing though. Leo really did treat me well. Maybe too well. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee, planned these elaborate date nights, bought me flowers for no reason. But it felt more like he was following some playbook on how to be the perfect boyfriend, instead of actually being spontaneous and romantic from the heart. It was all the right moves, but somehow, they felt hollow. I started feeling guilty for not being more grateful, which, perversely, made me resent the whole situation even more. He was doing everything right according to everyone else, but it just wasn't working for me anymore. I needed someone who could keep me guessing, make me work a little for their attention instead of just being available 24/7. That's when I downloaded dating apps. Not because I was planning to cheat or anything. Not then, anyway. I just wanted to see what else was out there. Leo didn't need to know because I was just looking, just curious about what kind of options existed beyond my current situation. Or so I told myself, trying to quiet the growing unease in my own conscience. The matches started coming in, a dizzying array of faces and profiles, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have choices. Guys who didn't text back immediately, who had interesting jobs and hobbies, who seemed like they actually had full lives that didn't revolve around their girlfriends. It was refreshing to talk to people who weren't constantly asking about my feelings, who didn't dissect every nuance of my day. It was light, superficial, and thrillingly new. That's when I matched with Damon. Right from his pictures, I could tell he was different from Leo. He looked confident, had this raw, edgy quality to him that Leo completely lacked. Tattoos snaking up his arms, a motorcycle gleaming in one photo, some job that sounded way more exciting than whatever Leo did in his office cubicle. He wasn't conventionally pretty in the wholesome way Leo was. Damon had a rugged handsomeness, a hint of danger in his eyes that immediately captivated me. When Damon messaged me, he was direct and flirty without being clingy or needy. There was an air of casual indifference about him that I found incredibly appealing. We started chatting, and I felt this rush of excitement, this tangible spark that had been missing with Leo for months. Damon would take hours to text back, sometimes even a full day, which should have annoyed me, but instead, it made me want his attention more. It became a game, a pursuit, and I was hooked. He'd make these slightly inappropriate, subtly suggestive comments that made me feel desirable in a way Leo's constant, earnest compliments never did. It was intoxicating. I kept telling myself it was just harmless conversation, just talking to someone new. A bit of flirting, nothing more. But honestly, I was already emotionally checking out of my relationship with Leo. I'd catch myself comparing everything Leo did to what I imagined Damon would do instead. Leo's predictable questions about my day felt intrusive. Damon's infrequent messages felt like a challenge. Leo's stable presence felt suffocating. Damon's elusive nature felt like freedom. The contrast was stark, and I found myself increasingly drawn to the unpredictable chaos Damon promised. 2 months into dating Leo, and only a few weeks after matching with Damon, I finally agreed to meet Damon for coffee. Just coffee, I rationalized, nothing more. But the second I saw him in person, I knew I was in trouble. He had this electric energy Leo completely lacked, confident, a little cocky, didn't seem to care whether I showed up or not. He arrived a few minutes late, a smirk on his face, and simply nodded when he saw me, as if my presence was expected but not overly exciting. This nonchalance, this quiet arrogance, was a magnet. We ended up talking for hours, the coffee long forgotten. His stories were wilder, his perspective sharper, his humor darker. He spoke of traveling, of risks taken, of living life on the edge, everything I craved, and when he casually suggested going back to his place, the words barely left his lips before I found myself agreeing. No hesitation, no second thoughts about Leo. It was as if a spell had been cast. Being with Damon was everything my relationship with Leo wasn't. There was this intensity, this raw passion, this feeling like anything could happen at any moment. He didn't constantly ask if I was okay or worry about my comfort level. He just took charge, and it was exactly what I'd been missing. It felt dangerous, exhilarating, and completely liberating. Every touch, every kiss, felt like an act of rebellion against the safe, predictable life I was leading. I started meeting Damon whenever Leo was at work. It was surprisingly easy since Leo trusted me completely and never questioned where I was going or who I was with. Going out with Chloe, I'd say, or working late on a project. He'd simply smile, tell me to have fun, or wish me luck. His unwavering trust, which should have been a comfort, bothered me. Like, shouldn't he be a little concerned about losing me? His complete lack of jealousy made me feel like maybe I wasn't that important to him anyway. It was a twisted logic, fueled by my own guilt and the intoxicating newness of Damon, but it felt valid at the time. I convinced myself that if he truly loved me, he'd fight for me, he'd be possessive, he'd show some spark. Leo showed none of that. Everything with Damon felt dangerous and thrilling. He wouldn't always respond to my texts, which made me obsess over my phone, waiting for his messages. When we were together, he'd mention other women or talk about his exes in ways that made me feel like I had to compete for his attention, for his affection. It should have been a red flag, a blaring siren of warning, but it just made me want him more. I was so caught up in the chase, in the fleeting moments of his intense focus, that I ignored every internal alarm bell. Meanwhile, Leo was still being his predictable self, still bringing me my favorite coffee, still planning thoughtful dates, still being supportive about everything. But now it all felt suffocating. I'd sit through dinner with him, thinking about Damon, wondering when I'd see him next, pulling away when Leo tried to hold my hand, his touch feeling alien, almost repulsive. My heart belonged somewhere else now, or so I convinced myself. I started picking fights with Leo over stupid things. He'd suggest a restaurant, and I'd complain it was boring. He'd want to stay in for a quiet night, and I'd accuse him of being antisocial. He'd talk about future plans, a trip next year, maybe even looking at apartments together, and I'd get irritated that he was being presumptuous, acting like we had a future when I knew we didn't. Looking back, I was creating distance, building a wall, desperately trying to justify what I was doing behind his back. The lying got easier every time. I'd tell Leo I was going out with girlfriends and meet Damon instead. I'd claim I was working late and spend the afternoon at Damon's apartment. Leo never questioned me or seemed suspicious, which honestly made it feel like he didn't care enough to pay attention. His trust, once a comfort, became another reason to resent him. After 2 months of this double life, Leo started pushing for answers about why I'd been so distant. His gentle inquiries slowly turned into concerned pleas. He wanted to have these deep conversations about our relationship, about where we stood, and I'd get frustrated that he was being needy and insecure. I need space to figure things out, I'd tell him, retreating further, but he kept suffocating me with his concern, his unwavering gaze demanding honesty I wasn't prepared to give. That's when I realized I had to choose. Damon was starting to make comments about how I should just break up with my boring boyfriend if I wasn't happy. The way he said it made it sound so obvious and simple, so logical. And for me, in my confused, thrill-seeking state, it was... So, I made my decision. I was choosing excitement over security, passion over stability. I was 23 and deserved to be with someone who made me feel alive, who set my soul on fire, instead of settling for someone safe just because he treated me well on paper. It felt like a brave, definitive step, a declaration of independence. When Leo finally cornered me for that serious talk, his eyes brimming with a sadness I couldn't bear to look at directly, I could have lied again. I could have strung him along, offered vague excuses. But I was tired of pretending. The truth, ugly and brutal as it was, spilled out. I told him everything. That I'd been seeing someone else for 2 months, that I wasn't happy, that I needed something different than what he could give me. Leo just sat there, looking utterly shocked, as I explained about Damon and how we'd been hooking up. His face, usually so open and kind, was a mask of disbelief and pain. I expected anger. I expected him to shout, to fight, to demand answers. I expected him to rage, to show me the passion I craved, to fight for me like a real man would. But instead of getting angry or fighting for me, he just sat there, quiet, defeated. He simply asked why. "What did I do wrong, Maya?" he whispered. His voice barely audible, thick with a pain that ripped through me, but didn't stop me. That's when I knew for sure I was making the right choice. My twisted logic screamed it. A real man, a man with edge, would have shown some fire, some passion, some fight. He would have been furious, heartbroken, desperate. But Leo just sat there looking defeated, asking what he could do to change my mind, his eyes wide and pleading. It was a weakness in my eyes, proof that he wasn't the man for me. I tried to explain that I needed someone with more edge, someone exciting who wasn't so predictable. Leo looked at me like he couldn't understand what I was talking about, like I was speaking a foreign language. And in that moment, that lack of understanding, that gentle confusion, only proved how wrong we were for each other. He didn't yell or fight or show any real emotion beyond that quiet, profound sadness, which was honestly disappointing. I wanted him to prove that losing me actually mattered to him, to make me feel like I was throwing away something truly irreplaceable. Instead, he just processed what I told him, asked logical, almost clinical questions about where we went wrong, as if dissecting a problem. His calm was chilling. The next morning, when I tried texting to check on him, to perhaps soothe my own conscience with a performative act of care, my messages weren't going through. He'd blocked me on everything: social media, phone, even payment apps. It seemed like such an overreaction to cut me off completely. So suddenly, instead of handling things maturely, I told myself it was childish, an unnecessary drama from someone who was supposed to be so calm. I didn't realize then that it was simply his way of protecting himself. I moved in with Damon pretty quickly after that. His place was nothing like Leo's organized, meticulously clean apartment. Clothes everywhere, empty bottles scattered, motorcycle parts on the kitchen counter, dirty dishes piled in the sink. But for a while, it felt real and authentic instead of like some sterile showroom. It was chaotic, yes, but it was alive. Living with Damon was everything I thought I wanted. Every day was unpredictable and exciting. Sometimes he'd come home with last-minute concert tickets, or we'd just spontaneously drive to another city because he felt like it. He didn't plan everything to death like Leo. He just lived in the moment, seizing whatever fleeting desire struck him. It was a whirlwind, and for a glorious, brief period, I felt truly free, truly myself. Sure, there were adjustments. Damon wasn't as financially stable as Leo had been, so I ended up covering more expenses than I was used to. Rent, groceries, utility bills often fell to me. But I rationalized it, telling myself that it felt more equal than Leo always insisting on paying for everything, which now, in retrospect, seemed controlling, a subtle way of asserting dominance. With Damon, it felt like a partnership, even if it was a financially lopsided one. Damon also wasn't as communicative as Leo had been. He didn't text constantly or always want to know how I was feeling. At first, I missed that constant attention, that gentle reassurance, but then I realized it was probably healthier. Leo had been so clingy and needy, always requiring validation, always needing to know I was okay. Damon's detachment felt like a breath of fresh air, a freedom from emotional obligation. Or so I told myself, clinging to these justifications like a lifeline. 3 months after leaving Leo, I was at this coffee shop with Damon when I spotted Leo across the room. My heart did this weird flutter, a strange, unexpected pang that caught me completely off guard. He looked really good. Different haircut, like he'd been working out, more confident, more self-assured than I remembered. There was a quiet strength about him, a lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there when he was with me. I waved, attempting to be friendly, to act like the mature adult I wanted to be seen as. But he looked right at me, his gaze holding mine for a fraction of a second, and then deliberately, unequivocally, looked away. It stung, more than I expected. We could at least acknowledge each other like adults, couldn't we? The entire time we were there, Damon was engrossed in his phone, ignoring me, while I kept glancing at Leo, a knot tightening in my stomach. When Leo left, he walked right past our table without looking at me, his stride purposeful, his head held high. Seeing Leo looking so put together and confident bothered me more than it should have. I'd expected him to look heartbroken, or at least affected by our breakup, but he seemed to be thriving. It made me wonder what he'd been doing with his time since we broke up. A flicker of doubt, a tiny crack in my carefully constructed facade of happiness, appeared. But I pushed those thoughts away because I'd made my choice for good reasons. Leo had been boring and predictable, even if he'd been reliable. Damon brought excitement to my life, even if it also brought chaos and uncertainty. That's what I wanted, right? Living with Damon was getting more complicated, though. What had seemed like passionate intensity was starting to feel like walking on eggshells. He'd get moody for no reason I could figure out, his temper flaring unpredictably. And when I'd tentatively ask what was wrong, trying to bridge the gap, he'd accuse me of being needy, of suffocating him. The roles had reversed. Damon started checking my phone when I wasn't around. At first, I told myself it was because he cared and wanted to make sure I was safe, a perverse echo of Leo's concern. But it felt different. When Leo worried about me, it came from love, a gentle, protective instinct. When Damon got suspicious, it felt controlling, a violation. He'd question me if I was even 10 minutes late getting home. If I mentioned a male coworker, Damon would spend hours grilling me about it, his eyes hard, his voice laced with accusation. I started editing my stories, omitting details, basically lying about harmless interactions to avoid setting him off. The anxiety became a constant companion. The fights were getting more intense, too. Leo and I used to have calm discussions when we disagreed, a respectful exchange of views. But Damon would explode over tiny things. He'd yell and throw things and make me feel crazy for bringing up legitimate concerns. I found myself missing Leo's emotional stability, his unwavering calm, more than I wanted to admit. With Leo, I'd always felt safe to express my feelings or bring up problems, confident that even if we disagreed, it would be handled with kindness. With Damon, I never knew if he'd be understanding or if he'd turn it into a huge, terrifying fight. Damon also didn't have his life together the way Leo had. He was constantly behind on bills, couldn't keep steady work, and expected me to cover more and more expenses. I started resenting that I was basically supporting both of us, financially and emotionally. When I'd try to talk about our financial situation, a very real and pressing concern, Damon would get defensive and accuse me of being materialistic. "At least I'm not some boring office drone like your ex," he'd sneer, "and you should appreciate that I'm a free spirit." But honestly, Leo's stability was starting to look incredibly appealing compared to wondering if we'd make rent each month. Leo had never made me worry about money or having a roof over my head. Meanwhile, I'd hear through Chloe and other mutual acquaintances that Leo was doing really well. He'd gotten promoted, was taking classes to further his career, had joined a gym. People said he seemed happier and more confident than ever. Part of me was glad for him, a small residual flicker of the affection I once had. But a larger, more bitter part of me was hurt that he was thriving without me, that my absence hadn't broken him. The breaking point came one night, after a party. Damon had been drinking and got into a jealous rage, accusing me of flirting with some guy I'd barely spoken to. When I tried to defend myself, to explain it was nothing, he grabbed my wrist during the argument and squeezed hard enough to leave bruises. He'd never been physically violent before. That night, for the first time in my life, I was truly, viscerally scared. He apologized the next morning, said he'd been drunk and stressed, promised it would never happen again. But I couldn't stop thinking about how Leo had never once made me feel physically unsafe, not even during our worst disagreements. That was the line. And Damon had crossed it. 6 months after that incident, I finally left Damon. It wasn't easy. He'd isolated me from most of my friends, making me feel like he was the only one I had left. And I'd become financially dependent on supporting him, which was backwards, but somehow that's how it worked out. Untangling myself from his toxic web felt like pulling my own skin off, but I knew I had to. I moved back in with my parents, which was humiliating at 24. Having to explain why my exciting relationship had fallen apart was embarrassing, especially since they'd clearly preferred Leo. The hardest part was admitting how wrong I'd been about everything. I'd given up a stable, loving relationship for chaos with someone who turned out to be controlling and abusive. The bitter taste of my own foolishness filled my mouth. I kept thinking about Leo and wondering how he was doing. Through social media, I'd created a new, anonymous account just to look. I could see he was still thriving. He'd moved to a nicer place, seemed to have an active social life, looked happy and healthy. His posts were filled with adventures, new hobbies, genuine smiles. I finally reached out to Chloe, cautiously, asking if she'd heard anything about Leo. She told me he was dating someone new, a woman he'd met through work who seemed really nice and treated him well. The news hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a casual pang this time, it was a deep, aching throb in my chest. Hearing that Leo had moved on, truly moved on, made me realize what I'd actually lost. It wasn't just a boring relationship. It was someone who'd loved me unconditionally and treated me better than I deserved, with a kindness and devotion I had foolishly scorned. Now he was giving all that care and devotion to someone else. The thought was a dagger to my heart. I started obsessing over his new girlfriend, checking her social media constantly. Her name was Amelia. She seemed perfect for him. Sweet, supportive, appreciative of his kindness instead of taking it for granted like I had. Her captions about him were filled with genuine admiration. Her photos with him radiated pure joy. It burned. It burned with the fire of envy and regret. I began having fantasies about reaching out to Leo and explaining everything that happened with Damon. In my mind, he'd realize I'd learned from my mistakes, that I'd grown, and would want to give us another chance. He'd see the new, improved Maya, the one who finally understood what real love was. It was a desperate, self-serving delusion, but I clung to it. 2 years after our breakup, I saw the announcement that utterly destroyed me. Leo was engaged to Amelia. The photos showed him with this woman who looked genuinely, radiantly happy, and the comments were full of people congratulating them and talking about what a perfect couple they made. My vision blurred as I stared at those engagement photos for hours, reading every single comment, each one a fresh stab. Leo looked incredible, confident, successful, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen before, even when he was with me. His fiancée looked like everything I wasn't: grateful, supportive, the kind of woman who would truly appreciate what she had. The ring was beautiful and obviously expensive, which meant Leo was doing well financially, thriving in his career. Meanwhile, I was still struggling to get my life together, working a job I didn't love, living at home, trying to piece back the fragments of my shattered self-esteem. I felt this overwhelming sense of loss that I hadn't expected, a crushing weight that stole my breath. Seeing Leo so happy with someone else made me realize, with brutal clarity, what I'd given up when I left him for Damon. I started obsessing over their relationship, checking both their social media accounts constantly, a masochistic ritual. They looked happy in every photo, traveling, at dinner parties, casual pictures around the house. She'd post captions about how grateful she was to have found him, how lucky she felt. Reading her posts made me angry. A bitter, irrational anger, because she was getting credit for appreciating Leo when I'd been with him first. She was acting like she'd discovered this amazing man when I'd already done the relationship work. It was a twisted, childish thought, but it consumed me. Since Leo still had me blocked everywhere, I created a fake account and sent him a long message. I poured my heart out, explaining how wrong I'd been about Damon, how much I'd come to appreciate Leo's qualities, how much I regretted throwing away what we'd had. I told him about how badly Damon had treated me, thinking that would make him feel protective, would stir some residual affection. I explained that I'd been young and stupid, that I'd learned from my mistakes, that I was ready to be the girlfriend he deserved, the wife he was about to take. But Leo never responded. I waited for weeks, checking constantly, my heart sinking with each passing day. He probably deleted it without reading, or Amelia saw it first and made him block my fake account too. The silence was deafening. The wedding was approaching, and I was running out of options, consumed by a desperate, irrational hope. I found out when and where it was happening through social media, stalking every public detail. I knew it was crazy, that it was utterly inappropriate, but I decided to go and try to talk to Leo before the ceremony. Just a minute, just a moment to explain, to plead my case. When I got to the venue, there was security. Of course there was. I couldn't get close without an invitation. I watched from across the street as guests arrived, looking happy and excited, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. I felt like an outsider, peering into a life I could have had, a happiness that was once within my grasp. I saw Leo arrive, and he looked incredible, confident, handsome, genuinely joyful, a man truly at peace. His bride, Amelia, was beautiful and glowing, surrounded by people who clearly adored her. They looked like they belonged together in a way Leo and I never had, an effortless harmony that spoke of true connection. Standing there, watching Leo's wedding, a bitter, final truth washed over me. I realized I'd lost him forever. He'd found someone who appreciated him and made him happy in ways I never had, never could. The dream was dead, and I was the one who had killed it. 6 months after Leo's wedding, I was still struggling to move on. The image of him and Amelia, so effortlessly happy, was seared into my mind. I tried dating, desperately trying to find a connection, a flicker of that elusive spark, but I couldn't stop comparing everyone to Leo and finding them lacking. None of them had his kindness, his reliability, his genuine care, his profound goodness. They were either boring, like I used to think Leo was, or exciting like Damon, but just as unreliable and selfish. My friends were tired of hearing about Leo and kept telling me I needed to move on, to get over it. There are plenty of fish in the sea, Maya. They'd chime, their well-meaning advice falling on deaf ears, but they didn't understand what I'd lost when I left him. I hadn't just lost a boyfriend. I'd lost a future, a home, a true partner. A year after his wedding, I saw another announcement that made my stomach drop, sending a cold shiver through me. Leo's wife was pregnant. They looked so happy in the photo, both glowing with excitement about starting a family. This felt like the final, definitive proof that Leo was never coming back. He wasn't just married. He was building a family with someone else. His life was moving forward, creating new chapters I would never be a part of. I decided to make one final, desperate attempt, a last plea to the ghost of our past. I wrote him a real letter, on actual paper, carefully articulating every raw emotion, every regret, every learned lesson, and mailed it to his house. I told him how sorry I was, how much I'd grown since our breakup, how happy I was that he'd found love with someone who deserved him. It was a confession, an apology, a final closure for myself, if not for him. But Leo never responded to my letter either. 3 months later, I saw the birth announcement. Leo and Amelia had a healthy baby boy, a beautiful little life. They looked exhausted, but blissfully, undeniably happy. Leo was a father now, building this beautiful, thriving life with his family, while I wasn't part of it at all. I was just some girl from his past that he'd rather forget, a painful footnote in the story of his journey to true happiness. I tried moving to Houston to start over, thinking maybe distance would help me forget Leo, help me escape the ever-present shadow of his happiness. But even there, in a new city where no one knew my past, I couldn't escape thinking about him constantly. He was everywhere, in the way a stranger held a door open, in the kind smile of a barista, in the quiet stability of a couple walking hand in hand. Every echo of goodness, every flicker of true kindness, brought him back. Now I'm 28, and I realize this is my life. I'm the girl who had true love, the kind people search their whole lives for, and threw it away for someone exciting who turned out to be garbage. Leo is never coming back. And honestly, why should he? He found everything he deserved, everything I was too blind to appreciate. Everyone tells me I need to move on, that obsessing over Leo is unhealthy, that it's holding me back. But they don't understand that Leo wasn't just some ex-boyfriend. He was the person who showed me what real love looked like, the benchmark against which all others will forever be judged and found wanting. I've tried dating other people, but they all fall short. They're either boring, like I used to think Leo was, or exciting like Damon, but just as unreliable and selfish, lacking the depth and integrity that only Leo possessed. Sometimes I wonder if I've idealized Leo in my memory, if the years have softened the edges of his predictability and magnified his virtues. But then I remember specific moments. How he'd bring me coffee, exactly how I liked it. How he'd listen to me vent about work with genuine empathy. How safe, how utterly at home I felt with him, secure in his unwavering devotion. And I know it was real. It was all real. The therapists keep asking what I learned, and I tell them I learned not to take good people for granted. That I learned the difference between fleeting excitement and lasting love, between surface-level thrill and deep abiding connection. But that doesn't help me now because Leo is gone, and I can't apply that lesson to him anymore. Now I'm alone in Houston, where nobody knows about Leo, and I can pretend to be someone who just hasn't found the right person yet. But the truth is, I did find the right person, and I chose someone else because I thought I deserved better. I chose the glittering illusion over the quiet, steadfast reality. The worst part is Leo probably doesn't think about me at all anymore. He's busy with his wife and kid, living this full, happy life that doesn't include me, that has completely erased my presence. Meanwhile, I think about him constantly. People ask what I want in a relationship now, and the answer is always, devastatingly, Leo. I want Leo back. I want a do-over where I'm smart enough to recognize what I have, to cherish the pure gold that was offered to me. But that's never going to happen because some mistakes you don't get to undo. So, this is my life alone at 28, comparing everyone to someone I lost years ago, knowing I had my shot at happiness and blew it. Leo is living his best life with someone who deserves him, and I'm dealing with the consequences of thinking I could do better. Maybe some people only get one chance at real love, and mine is over. Maybe this is what my life looks like now, always wondering what might have been. Always knowing that the best thing that ever happened to me is something I chose to walk away from. The funny thing is, if someone asked what advice I'd give to girls dating good guys, truly good guys, I'd tell them to appreciate what they have. Don't make my mistake. Don't throw away something real and precious for something that just looks more exciting, more dramatic, more like the movies. But nobody asks me for relationship advice anymore, because everyone knows I'm the cautionary tale. I'm the girl who had everything and lost it because I didn't know what I had until it was gone. That's my story. That's how I went from being loved by the best man I'll ever know to being alone, and bitter, and perpetually longing, still missing someone who probably doesn't even remember my middle.